The mayor of the city of New York should not be blamed for the murder of those police officers. That issue should not have been injected. It's wrong. I told the mayor that yesterday, and I don't support that. So I want to be clear on that. Number two, the mayor is not in any way to be treated with people turning their backs. It doesn't matter if you like the mayor or you don't like the mayor. You have to respect the mayor's position. I don't support that. But I do believe Mayor de Blasio should apologize to the New York City Police Department. I said it day one, and I think he'd get this over with if he did it.
Former mayor with words of advice to the current mayor, Rudy Giuliani, telling Bill de Blasio to apologize to the NYPD. Now, on Saturday, thousands of officers from around the country stood outside a Queens church to show their support for a fallen hero. Those same officers then turned their backs on Mayor de Blasio as he spoke at the funeral for Rafael Ramos. John Cardillo is a former New York City police officer who writes about law enforcement issues online. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks very much for inviting me on.
You know, you write this weekend Mayor de Blasio turned his back on us long before we turned our backs on him. Why was the actions of the officers appropriate this weekend?
Well, you know, what I wrote was a statement given to me by the officers, and the officers felt that the mayor had done something unprecedented, and that was making a statement while the protests were beginning in New York City, that he and his wife often had conversations where they told their son that he could quite possibly be injured or even killed at the hands of the NYPD, that as a young man of mixed race in New York City, he could possibly be in danger by the NYPD, who protects the mayor and his family. So I think at that point, the police officers were so insulted on a personal level that this transcended politics and this transcended tradition.
You know, we just heard former Mayor Giuliani talking about it, whether the head of the police union believes Mayor de Blasio has blood on his hands. Do you agree with former Mayor Giuliani that that's not necessarily the case?
Well, you know, look, Mayor Giuliani was an outstanding mayor. After 9/11, America's mayor. I worked as a police officer under him, and I have nothing but respect for the man. I fundamentally disagree with him on this because I think that Bill de Blasio did something so beyond the pale that it affected the officers as human beings who put their lives on the line every day. And they felt, and the word that they used, and I happen to agree with, were the mayor used incendiary rhetoric that led to mass civil unrest and potentially the murders of police officers Lou and Ramos. So I agree wholeheartedly with Mayor Giuliani that Mayor de Blasio owes the NYPD an apology. I respectfully disagree with him on the point that it was inappropriate of the NYPD and there was no place for them to turn their backs.
You know, John, we're hearing about these cases right now of officers sitting in their cruisers. Two separate incidents this weekend being shot at in Los Angeles, also in Florida. Do you feel a lack of response to the continuation of the protests have really led to these violent attacks on police officers?
Yeah, and Rick, if I might add, there was actually an even more egregious incident. I wrote about it on my blog in Durham, North Carolina, very similar to the New York incident, where a gunman walked up behind an officer, filling out a report in his vehicle. The officer saw him in the rearview mirror, exited the vehicle. The gunman drew a weapon, fired 6 times at the officer, struck the patrol car. Luckily, the officer wasn't hit. He returned fire, and that gunman is still at large. So there were actually 3 incidents, and that one was on Christmas Day. So I think that there is now, it's not coincidence that there are these random attacks on cops. It has to do with the protests. It has to do with the left-wing media's insightful reporting, where they're making it seem as if police officers are these violent, corrupt individuals, which they're not. And they're, in my opinion anyway, glorifying these protesters, many of whom are just common thugs and criminals.
John, there's just too much at stake. Something has to happen where these two sides need to come together. Tell us from Mayor de Blasio's side, what does he need to do? And what do the officers at NYPD, what do they need to do?
Well, look, the NYPD, by and large, is a very professional and pragmatic organization. The police officers, I speak to many every day, they don't want to be at odd ends with their mayor in City Hall. And so I think what Mayor Giuliani proposed is an excellent first step. Mayor de Blasio needs to apologize to the NYPD. I think he needs to go a step further and spend a lot of time in the neighborhoods that are most crime-ridden, explaining to people the need for the NYPD, why they need to respect the NYPD. I think if he does that, the rank-and-file men and women of the NYPD will be a relationship and show the mayor the respect that if he does that, he'll hopefully earn.
You know, Mayor de Blasio earlier this month talked about felony crimes falling 4.4% in November compared to the same period in 2013. Homicides down 6.8%. What do you attribute to the good news that we're seeing in New York City?
Well, I worked also for Police Commissioner Bratton during his first term as PC back in the early to mid 90s. And I think he is an outstanding police administrator. And so his deployment strategy is effective when New York was crime-ridden back in the day, and I attribute it to that, and also to the dedication and professionalism of the cops on the ground. Despite politics, New York City police officers still suit up, put on their vests, their guns, get in their cars, and go out every day to fight crime in as dedicated a way as they would if they had the most supportive mayor on the planet. So I think it's the commissioner and the troops inside the NYPD that are responsible for crime reduction. I certainly don't attribute that to Bill de Blasio.
John, looked like Vice President Biden, who spoke at the funeral on Saturday, was well received. Now, what can the administration do? What should President Obama, what should be his next step?
Well, just a quick point on that. The cops I spoke to absolutely loved what Vice President Biden said. They said that when he exited and went through the crowd and met with some of them, he was engaging, sincere, and they were a fan. That was a very apolitical moment. They were very appreciative of the vice president. But I would just say that President Obama should do the same things Mayor de Blasio should do. Explain to people that law enforcement officers, look, let me make a quick point. You've got about 400,000 active duty law enforcement people working every day in the United States, in a country of 300 million people, billions of police public interactions a year, and we hear about a handful of events that may or may not be problematic. So by and large, the United States has the most professional, restrained law enforcement in the world. And I think the president needs to convey that message of trust and respect to Americans on behalf of law enforcement.
You know, Officer Liu will be laid to rest in the coming days. What can we do as Americans to give pause to really honor his memory?
Well, you know, I think the rank and file NYPD made their point. I think this weekend, again, will be all about honoring P.O. Liu, as this past one was about honoring P.O. Ramos. And I think Americans should do what they're doing. I've been very active on social media. And by and large, I mean, the overwhelming support that I've seen for all of these officers, but especially police officers Ramos and Liu, it's
John,
been
I'm going to jump
heartwarming
in.
and overwhelming.
Yeah, we certainly will remember both officers for their heroic efforts. Thank you very much for that.